Divorce rates amongst the ADHD community is 66%. Why do you think that might be?
Well,
Karen Doherty,
couples counselor
who's helped thousands of people, who now specialises in neurodivergent relationships.
Karen, if you had 3 tips on how to make a marriage work, what would they be?
the first one is the communication is essential. You have to hold on to your own lives. You have to be able to be autonomous and then absolutely dependent. Too much of either or the other, it doesn't make the couple thrive. And the third one is...
Do you think a neurodivergent person, if they're in a relationship with a neurotypical person, there might be communication issues?
Neurodiverse experience to date have had a lot of negativity and challenges and misunderstanding in their early lives that have left them fragile and not confident about themselves. And I think the neurodiverse population has probably had more of that than the neurotypical.
What advice would you give to a couple like that?
It's recognising what is love. What's your definition of love, Alex?
I think with an ADHD person, when they meet someone, how can someone tell the difference between a hyper-obsession and actually falling in real love with somebody?
You can't. Everybody, whether you're ND or not ND, there's that limerence. Now, yes, definitely with some ND relationships, there's an intensity, a passionate intensity, almost a merge. These relationships are very prone to that merging at the very beginning. It's too intense to bear sometimes. People are very sure that they found their soulmate and that this is, that this is how what they've been looking for. So it's incredibly intense. Now, whether love develops out of that or not it's different for everyone. But that passion and merge at the beginning is a big part of these relationships. It's a big indicator of whether there is any neurodiversity, actually, because do you understand what I say when I say merged? It's almost as if two people their lives they just cling together. They sort of lose the ability to dance autonomously. They can't do that. They can't be autonomous. Everything is related back to the relationship, and that makes it incredibly intense. And of course, nobody can live like that. That said, neurodiverse relationships can do that for quite a while until something breaks it. So sometimes that's a loss of interest. But I've met couples that have been merged for quite a long time and are each other's worlds, neurodiverse couples. But it gets broken when a third is introduced. So a child. That's really tricky for these couples because then they have to sort of separate and there's a third coming in. So it can be quite tricky.
That really early stage in a relationship where they've just met and there's this flood of excitement, do you think that is love at that early stage, or is that more an infatuation, an obsession?
Or just chemicals, intoxication. Everybody loves falling in love. What is love? What's your definition of love, Alex?
The thought of them not being in your life is devastating. I think for me, that's probably the definition of love.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Too unbearably painful to even consider the thought of them not being in your life tomorrow.
But they're gone, yes. Yes. But you wouldn't know that, really. You'd need time to develop that. You'd need time to know that you wanted that person there for a long time. I always say to people, it's 2 years, isn't it? 2 years is the time. 2 years is the time when it's make or break, really, for couples of age, so to speak. After about 18 months, 19 months, all the limerence is gone. Most of it's gone. You sort of got to know each other and you're ready to say, okay, am I going to go on with this or is this not going to happen? And that's when you really know whether you're in love or not, I think.
Do you think a neurodivergent person, if they're in a relationship with a or a neurotypical person, there might be communication issues?
Always. Yes, always. There's all sorts of communication issues. It's literally you're reading from different pages. Yes.
How, if someone comes to you and they're having communication issues, what advice would you give to a couple like that?
It's recognizing where the communication goes wrong. It's recognizing the triggers. Communication suffers when there is an emotional trigger, especially with a neurodiverse person. something in a conversation will trigger an emotional response. The more neurotypical might not have realized that they've triggered that. They might not have realized that they've said something that has hit hard. The more neurodiverse, once triggered, the executive function starts to falter. So they stop there. That's where they stop the conversation. They haven't probably heard the end of the sentence. From that moment on, you've got two people having different conversations. The neurodiverse is on that last sentence, and the neurotypical is thinking, I was talking about this, and he's talking about that. Let's give you an example. Bins. Can you take the bins out, please, darling? I took them out last night. I know you did. I know you took them out last night. They need taking out again. Can you take them out? But I took them out last night. No, I get that. I understand you took them out, and I understand, and thank you for taking them out last night. But they need to go out tonight because the bin men are coming and there's something happening down the end of the close and this, that, and the other. You don't understand. I did it last night. That's a classic miscommunication where there's been a defensive response triggered because the bins are out, and they can't hear that there's actually a reason for something else beyond that. And that happens in many, many, many micro ways, many, many times in relationships.
So is that an incompatibility, or is there a solution to the communication issues? As
soon as you know that that's happened, so that little skit, you play that out in a room with a couple, and their faces will light up as they recognise that they've done that 1,000 times. 1,000 times. One's been saying something, the other one has been hurt or got defensive or thought that they were in the wrong in some way, stopped communicating about the issue and gone into a defense mode, and then the conversation is lost. So that's a classic sort of communication issue. You've also got, when somebody is not quite on point, if somebody's feeling very dysregulated, they won't be able to have the same conversation in that moment as they can 3 hours later when they're more relaxed and their sensory issues have calmed down. Perhaps they've just come home from work. Classic that, isn't it? People coming home from work and, for example, the neurotypical mum has got the kids and really just wants, hi, how are you? Can you just sit down? But of course the neurodiverse is absolutely can't do anything. They're overwhelmed. Their sensory reactions are just, they're inflamed. They need to sit down. They just need 10 minutes, 15 minutes just to take a break.
Do you think that emotional dysregulation that the ADHD might present, do you think that's difficult to understand for the other partner who isn't ADHD?
I think it's possibly the most difficult thing. The most difficult challenge to the relationships is the emotional dysregulation. There are tools, obviously, that we work with couples to sort of recognise it and take time out. Because once it's triggered, and if there is a sort of a stimulatory escalation, if the partner doesn't know what's going on and doesn't realise that there's stimulation being sought, and it then enters into the ring, if they both get in the ring, and it's like a twister, it just goes.
Is there a particular type of emotional dysregulation that you see cropping up time and time again with your clients in their relationships?
RSD, I think, is probably the most known, the one that people talk about. It's that being triggered by hearing a criticism or a rejection in an unintentional comment of the partner. And it's quite serious because some people, that's a visceral reaction. It's a felt reaction. And it takes time to recover from it. You're nodding. You know that one. Oh,
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's debilitating. Where does it come from, do you think?
ADHD is that, an ADHD psyche is just intense and passionate, isn't it? You can't take that away from it. That's the beauty of it. That's why it's fabulous to work with. It's why it's fabulous to be around. But, it comes at a cost. So there is a very, very high sensitivity level.
If you are someone with ADHD, this RSD is a thing that you suffer with and you're dating. Is that something you should bring up in the early stages?
I think so. I think that communication from early on, as I was saying earlier, the younger couples that I see who come in and they know this stuff, they understand it. They've got far more chance of making a really good fist of a relationship. So the more open and honest, the more tolerant people can be. Oh, okay, I wondered why he did that. I wonder why he went off in a huff like that. Oh, God, yeah, okay. He's feeling a bit triggered, so that's all right. He'll come back. Because if it's managed well, it doesn't have to have a lasting impact. If it doesn't get to the extent of absolute debilitation, it doesn't have to. It doesn't have to last. It can subside pretty quickly if it's managed well.
When I say debilitating, it is for me in the short to medium term.
That's right.
I now know from experience to not do anything or act on it when I'm in that moment of extreme dysregulation, and to remove myself from the situation, because otherwise I might say something that I'll regret, and that is going to cause me further anxiety down the line. Do you have any tips for anyone with ADHD on how they might manage their RSD in relationships?
Well, we have, there's sort of techniques, couples developing codes between them, trusting each other enough to be able to give a signal. You all right? Just a little signal, a tap, or a code word that they use in private to sort of avoid the escalations. Interestingly, the partners can usually see the dysregulation before the neurodiverse partner. The partners can feel it coming. These relationships, they can develop an eggshell type feel to them. And the more neurotypical partners are very, very hypervigilant around it. So if you can identify that and help the neurotypical partner to be able to sort of be confident enough to say, hey, come on, or call a code word, and that both of them will agree that the code word is for the couple, not that it's you being used to shut anybody up or close anybody down. It's being used for the benefit of the couple, so that the couple can walk away and then reconvene a bit later. Because 9 times out of 10, what happens, what my couples report is that if they avoid it, it's usually forgotten quite quickly. It's a momentary thing. It's a transitory thing. It's usually forgotten quite quickly. And then we have a process conversation the next day where the triggers can sometimes be remembered, and a couple can build up a lexicon of triggers, working together at it. And it does work. It stops those escalations, those fights that you were talking about. That's, that are common features of relationships with ADHD. It can really help calm them down. But it takes two.
So easy to get into a spiral with the RSD if you do act impulsively out. If you act on a trigger, because then you can lash out. In response to that, your partner says something back that further flares the RSD, and it very quickly can spiral into a very impulsive act at the end of it, like I'm moving out, or I want a divorce. And in that moment, some crazy impulsive decisions can happen. But I've never got that far, but I can see how it can. And actually, if you just put some time between, then that would never happen. Oh, you would come back with your tail between your legs and be like, I didn't mean what I said.
That's right.
An hour ago. I don't want to break up. I don't want a divorce. I'm sorry, I didn't mean that.
See, that's a really common pattern where things are said that hurt, things are said that stick, and they stick more with the neurotypical, interestingly. A lot of my work is around actually helping the couples let go of the resentment that's built up as in the aftermath of those arguments.
If you are someone who is feeling guilty about saying something in one of those flare-ups, you have lashed out, you have given into that impulse, and you've said something, and now that haunts you, what you said. You didn't mean it, and you've said sorry, but you still feel immensely weighted with guilt. Do you have any advice for someone in that situation?
That's really hard for somebody to let go of it, especially a neurodiverse person, because they feel everything so acutely. So it is really difficult. I think that is another feature of a really healthy relationship, that somebody could take that to their partner and say, this guilt is crippling me. But there's also another bit to it that you have to recognize, or the ADHD or the neurodiverse person has to recognize that that's a conflated sense of guilt. It's not real. It's intense and it's conflated, and you have to be able to see that and stand back from it a bit to manage it better, not let it swamp you.
Do you think there's some value to admit and to accept that it wasn't your fault? And does that go some way to removing the shame and the guilt if you say, actually, yes, I said that when I was in that dysregulated state of rage, but actually I wasn't probably reacting to what you said or did. I was probably reacting because what you said or did snapped my nervous system back to a trauma that happened years ago.
That's not an ADHD thing. Anybody can be triggered by a trauma from their past. So it's not just an ADHD thing. That's us. That's us as a species. We can be triggered. The neurodiverse response is probably more intense to it. Again, I think that if a couple understand what's going on, then it takes the heat out of it a little bit. But both of you will have your triggers. The key to this is the management of being triggered. Because yes, of course, a couple can go through a phase, a year, 2 years, 3 years, learning how to manage these symptoms or traits or behaviors, triggers. But eventually you have to take responsibility for it, don't you? The individuals in the couple and the couple itself has to take a responsibility. And it doesn't matter whether it's ADHD or a past trauma. You have to take responsibility for the here and now, and that you want the relationship to remain healthy.
How does somebody go about, what's the first step someone might take in taking responsibility for those responses?
Owning them, understanding them, sharing them, communicating them, all of those things to the partner and with the partner help take out the damage, the potential damage that can cause.
The success stories you've seen within ADHD couples, can you see any common similarities between the success stories?
It's both want it to be successful. Both want to learn, both want to work. Neither of them want to leave. But it's an interesting tipping point. If a couple has been in a really vicious pattern or cycle for many, many years, that it might be quite hard to let go of those years of resentment and hurt.
I read a scary statistic that divorce rates amongst the ADHD community is 66%, which I think is considerably higher than the neurotypical community. Why do you think that might be?
Well, it was because these relationships are really hard work. They don't just flow. They are either really, really good, or they can be pretty difficult to manage. That roller coaster of emotional ups, downs, great, bad, all of that. I'm not sure that statistic is absolutely correct anymore. As I said earlier, actually, I think that it was potentially very correct. But if I think about the younger couples that I'm seeing now that come in, they've got their diagnosis, they want their marriages to work, they've got every possibility of it working. So my hope and my belief is that the divorce rate won't be that there won't be that great discrepancy between neurotypical and mixed, neurodiverse relationships.
Based on what you've seen, do you think there's a higher prevalence of infidelity and cheating amongst partners who have ADHD?
Possibly. I don't really like to commit to that. I don't want to tar the ADHD community with that brush. Possibly. We know that there is a difficulty with staying stimulated intellectually, psychically. There's a difficulty, and relationships, and you get to know somebody, it can be pretty much the same. So we know that. But if you're asking anybody why there is extramarital sex, there's got to be other reasons. There are other reasons as well. It's not just that the ADHD is driving them out. The relationship itself, there's a crack somewhere.
What are the biggest cracks then that you see in your clinic? What do people come with you? What's the first thing they say when you sit down with them?
Can you help us stop fighting? I can't stand her. Can you please tell her she's ADHD? He's definitely autistic. Definitely. Can you tell him, please? I could go on. That happens all the time. But mainly people are genuinely needing help. They want to change the repetitive vicious cycles and patterns that are hurting them, they're hurting their kids, they're hurting their whole lives, they're affecting the quality of their lives.
How do they do that?
They look for help. They do a lot of research. I mean, that's incredible for neurodiverse population. Research is their sort of, it's their comfy place, isn't it? It's their comfy chair. So there's a lot of research gone into it. But, the research is one thing, but actually working with somebody like me in a room, that's very different, when you're actually having to, it's not, you can't accuse somebody of it. You're working in the moment. You're getting somebody to actually look at it. So identify the bit that the ADHD is playing, but also what are you two doing? What are you actually doing? Yeah, we can see the ADHD is impacting here, but how are you responding? Can you do something differently?
What else could someone do if they're trying to recognize toxic or unhealthy patterns in their relationship? What research, what signs could they look out for?
People living separate parallel lives. Of course, everybody needs autonomy and freedom within their relationship, but that sort of that space between them getting bigger and bigger, and that is a feature actually of neurodiverse relationships when they haven't been diagnosed and they haven't got any help. Very often, the more neurotypical will just pull away. The neurodiverse part of the relationship is very, it's very able to look after itself, entertain itself. There's lots of ideas and creativity. So it's quite happy on its own sometimes, a lot of the time. That leaves the spouse or the partner quite lonely. And if they pull back too much, then that space opens up. And very often that is, if you're asking me about the primary issue that these relationships really have to deal with, it's where there is a lack of intimate reciprocity. And I don't mean sex, I mean intimacy. I mean chatting, joshing, that lack of reciprocity where one person is cut off a bit too much too often. You've got classics, haven't you? Sort of going upstairs, working all night, not interacting, or maybe not being able to. Lots of the issues are related to the emotional state, actually, of the more neurodiverse, because something may be planned in the diary, but they may not just feel like doing it. And that's a problem because the other one has been looking forward to doing it for ages. And so you've got this potential conflict here about, I don't know if I can do it. I don't feel well. I'm not up to it tonight. I can't do it. So you have to somehow broker compromises around this stuff so that it doesn't cause these rifts and the separate lives.
Do you see a parent-child dynamic sometimes when there's an ADHD person in a relationship with a non-ADHD person?
I have a different take on it, really. I think it comes down to a couple fit, right? So we talk about couple fits. Why are people attracted to each other? What brings them in? Why do they fit together? And one of the things that I have noticed over the years in practice is that these neurodiverse couples have a sort of there's a common couple fit. It'll be with a neurodiverse AS or ADHD pairing up with quite a capable other. They'll be maybe successful, but very good at life. The neurodiverse is brilliant, obviously. They've got brilliance, they've got ideas, creativity, wherever their mathematical genius, wherever their bent is. And they'll pair up or choose somebody who has life skills, because that's not so good for them. But what happens is that person also has a vulnerability. Those life skills have been developed very often from being early adultized. They've had a lot of trauma in their lives. The neurotypical has had quite a lot of trauma. But they've built the defenses and they've managed and they've made that they've sort of come through and they made themselves successful. But you have these two vulnerable people coming together. Where the parent-child comes in is that this one is good at life. So it seems like at the beginning they can see that this one's not quite so good at life. The neurodiverse is not quite so good at it. And it's easy for them to do it. It's easy. It's easy to plan a holiday, whereas the neurodiverse, planning, don't like it. Timing, don't like it. Or I'm not sure I want to go there. Whereas the other one can do it. So there's a lot of in the beginning of the relationships, there's a lot of good nature around it. And okay, well, I'll do that, you do that. And it starts off quite equal. They both get a bit of what they need from each other. But as it goes on, the more capable gets overloaded, particularly when children come in and they find themselves having to do much more of the drudgery, much more of the relentlessness that goes with domesticity. And that, I think, is where the sort of name parent-child comes in, is that they have to step up. And that actually, when there's an inequality then, a real inequality, and that's what breaks down. That's what breaks the couples.
Is that resentment?
Oh, huge resentment, anger, sadness, loneliness, frustration, and just actually exhaustion.
And is there a point where once you go beyond that, it's too far and there's no fixing it?
Yes.
Or can the neurodivergent person make changes?
It's like any couple, though, Alex. Push it too far and it can't be fixed. But you hope that people come in, neurodiverse or neurotypical, you hope that people come in before that point.
And the warning signs would be similar to what you said earlier, rouse, outbursts.
Or absolute disconnection, absolute withdrawal, disconnection. And I don't mean withdrawal in the sense of a neurodiverse person moving away because they're overwhelmed, but I mean proper withdrawal on both parts, just that breakdown, the inability to actually come together.
The neurodivergent person might look lazy some days, when in actual fact they might just be overwhelmed. So,
or feeling genuinely lethargic, feeling generally as if they can't move. That fogginess in the morning, that they can't get out of bed. Some need their meds before they get out of bed. Some people wake up to take meds just to get them going. Those are physiological. They're physiological reasons. They're not. Nobody's lazy.
No, and so how can the neurotypical partner? That's important that they spot that isn't laziness and that is for other reasons. So what signs can the neurotypical person look for to see that it is an overwhelmed person rather than someone who's lazy?
Again, it's knowledge. Knowledge is power, isn't it? There he is in bed again. I'm not taking him a cup of tea. It's just too much. Actually, I love him. He's having a bad day. He's not having one of those days. I keep saying him, but it could be her. It could be her. It's not just always him. Having a bad day. Okay, so let's give him another hour. It all comes down to knowledge, compassion, and communication.
Do you think masking? Because I suppose if you're masking early on, then there's a higher chance that your true, authentic, vulnerable self is going to go unnoticed later on. Do you think masking early on in a relationship during the dating phase is a good idea or a bad idea?
It's sort of a defensive strategy, masking, isn't it? Okay. And it's particularly well developed by neurodiverse personalities. But everybody does it. Everybody pretends in the early times. Everybody has to put on a show. Very few people are actually confident enough to just be themselves. So I think it's a matter of understanding that if you do want to be, the more authentic any one of us is at the beginning of a relationship, the more honesty that can be had in those early days, the more chance you've got of having a better communication.
Do you think it's harder for a neurodivergent person, someone with ADHD or ASD or any neurodivergent condition, do you think it's harder for them to show their true self in that really early stages because they might have been exposed to more criticism than the neurotypical person throughout their whole life?
Yeah, there's no doubt that, and that goes back to my point that I made earlier about the building of core self, being confident in oneself. How is that built? How as a species do we build that? It's positive reinforcement, isn't it? And neurodiverse experience to date, and I think that tide has turned, but I think lots of people to date have had a lot of negativity and challenges and misunderstanding in their early lives that have left them fragile and not confident about themselves. And I think the neurodiverse population has probably had more of that than the neurotypical. But I don't know that that's going to be. I don't know that that's the way forward. I think neurodiversity is much more accepted, understood, and known about. So hopefully that's not going to be quite so bad for for young people coming through.
Absolutely. I think there's a lot of more awareness, acceptance, all of this stuff makes it much easier for people with neurodiversity to recognize that they're masking. I think lots of people were probably masking unknowingly for a long time. Yeah. Not even knowing that they were trying to shape shift, mirror, bend who they are to please the person that they're with. Yeah. Now people know that. So that's the first step, right? Is you can't change something if you don't know it's happening in the first place. From your experience in your clinic, do you think from a neurotypical person's point of view, do you think ADHD people are difficult to live with?
Oh, come on, I can't answer that. No, I don't think they're difficult to live with. They are, well, they can be. They can be. Can be. Obviously, it's a challenge for a relationship. And neurodiversity is a challenge for a relationship. Okay, it's a challenge on many levels. But if you commit in and know that you're in a neurodiverse relationship, the highs are really high. There's some brilliance that goes with it, and you can mitigate the lows with the education, with the strategies, with the knowledge. You can mitigate the lows, but it is a challenge. It is a challenge. Undiagnosed, unfettered, it's a challenge.
Yeah, no, I think it is. But like you said, I think there's also positives, lots of positives.
Of course.
Spontaneity. Yeah. We're always not always, but we can be very fun.
Very much fun.
And positivity is a good thing. If we're going on holiday, we're not going on holiday in a week. We're going on holiday tonight.
That's right. It's fun. It's really good fun. And people get attracted to that. When you were talking about the parent-child, that neurotypical whu was early adultized and has had to be grown up since they were 8, they love that side of it. That's what they're drawn to: the fun, the charm, the charisma, the passion, all of those good things. Yeah, that's exactly what they're drawn to. So don't ever think about the negatives not being outweighed by the positives. You've just got to manage the negatives.
Yeah, absolutely. The sensitivity that is responsible for the RSD is also what's responsible for making them love you as hard as they do, and to probably be incredibly loyal.
Yes, it's a feature.
So you've got to take
huge loyalty.
Huge sensitivity comes responsibility, but also huge loyalty and love.
It does. It does. I see loads and loads of couples that are really, really. One of the things when people come in, you say, "Okay, what did you see in her?" She was just safe. She was stable. She felt loyal. I never thought that she was going to cheat on me. That's really common. That neurodiversity is very, very secure in its own way. It doesn't want to play around. It doesn't want to. It finds a base and it wants to stay there. It wants to attach.
One of the questions I get quite a lot from my community with relationship and ADHD management is that they love their partner deeply and they can see a future with them, but they're bored. Right, that they're just not getting the excitement. And not to say that that's at a catastrophic level that they're going to look for it elsewhere, but they want to try and ignite some excitement and some joy, because it has gone. That's what I've been told. If someone has ADHD and they're in a loving relationship, but they're bored, what advice would you give to someone in that situation?
Bored with what?
Spending time with their partner no longer excites them.
That's a bit tricky, isn't it? That's too tricky and too simple. It can't be just spending time with their partner bores them. There has to be, if they love them and want to be in a relationship with them, there has to be some creativity around that. There just has to be, because the partner itself is the same as it ever was. I mean, everybody gets bored in relationships. Everybody, neurotypicals and neurodiverse. It's the work of that couple to help moderate it. I don't think it just falls to the ADHD to not be bored. I think it's a couple thing. If you're bored, okay, so where are the projects? Where are the joint projects? Where are your individual projects? How do you manage that boredom? What do you need? How much stimulation do you need? I mean, one of the biggest problems that I encounter with the couples is that the neurodiverse is never bored because it's always working. It's always working. The work drive is phenomenal, and that's how they waylay the boredom, actually. They're not sitting at home twiddling their thumbs or watching Netflix. They're working. That's a bigger issue, I think, than sort of people saying they're bored.
Communication, do you think that's a staple of a healthy relationship?
It's the fundamental basis on which it's all built.
And do you think you should communicate with your partner if you are feeling that there's a lack of stimulation during a particular month or day? Do you think you should voice that concern with your partner?
Yes. It's not the partner's fault. It's you that's feeling it. It's not the partner's fault. With a bit of luck, they'll send you off with your backpack, go and do something, I don't know, climb a wall or do something, keep yourself out of trouble. It doesn't have to be the end of the world. But it needs to be known, because that's a feature, isn't it? That's a feature of the makeup. That's a feature of the psyche, that it needs stimulation. It needs to be able to be free. It needs to be able to explore. It needs to be able to do this stuff. So that has to be communicated, and a spouse or a partner needs to be on board with that.
Every week, I ask my Instagram community to give me their woes, and I put it in a washing machine. It's called the washing machine of woes.
Oh my God.
I thought we were going to do this now. We'll see what they've said. Let me have a look. I wrote down a couple. What kind of partner does an ADHD woman need?
What kind of partner does an ADHD woman need? See, what kind of partner does that woman need? Not just because she's ADHD. What kind of partner does she need? Is she creative ADHD? Is she quiet? I mean, what kind of partner does she need? I don't know. I wouldn't even know where to start with that. Who do ADHD women really thrive with is people who are stable, who can... Female ADHD is very challenging, very mercurial. It's very introverted rather than extroverted. So it needs to be able to communicate. It needs somebody who can hold it. It needs somebody secure and stable. But then most of us need that. So I wouldn't be able to draw a picture of the type of person that an ADHD woman would want, except somebody,
very individualistic. We need to know more about the person.
Of course. You can't just ADHD isn't the identity. Who are you? Yes, you've got ADHD, but who are you? Relationships are impacted by this stuff, but they're not the whole person. They're not the whole thing. And I think that gets lost a lot on social media. I think everybody, it's become an identity. I'm an ADA. I'm AS. And actually, you're a person. Your neurobiology is slightly different, but you're a person. You come with all of that, You come with what we didn't talk about was working through two lenses, the dual lens of the classical couple therapeutic approach, and then the more in the moment behavioral approach, identifying the traits of the neurodiversity that impact the couple, and how that is a really good way to work with these couples. We didn't talk about that, rather than just plain. The courses that I offer, the first 6 are sort of identifying how the neurodiversity has impacted the couple dynamic. And then the second 6 is actually looking at the history, the background. Because so many people come in crisis, I sort of have to deal with the behaviours, the escalations, the fights, the viciousness, the silences, the withdrawal. I have to deal with the actual traits, the behaviours and the cycles. That's got to be my first point of call, so that you can get people actually calm down and talking to each other. And then the second course, because I only really work short term, but the second course is more about the integration of those behavioral traits with the family histories, with the genealogy, with the psychodynamic histories of where they've both come from. Because you've got a couple in the room, and you could have 100 people in the room. Both sides, the families, the extended families, the friends. You've got a lot of people in the room. So it's not just the ADHD. You've got to look at that, but it's how you do it.
Karen, if you had 3 tips on how to make a marriage work, what would they be?
The first one is the communication is essential. You have to hold on to your own lives, not just merge. You have to be able to dance. You have to be able to be autonomous and then absolutely dependent. It's that dance, and you've got to get it right. Too much of either or the other, and it doesn't fit. It doesn't make the couple thrive. The couple doesn't thrive. And the third one, I think, is don't take it all so seriously. Just have fun with it. You've got to have fun in a relationship. In life, you've got to have fun. But in a relationship, with the relentlessness of it, you just need a really good sense of humour, actually. I'm afraid to say. You do.
Just finally, Karen, what's 3 positive things that a neurodivergent person could bring to a relationship?
God, only 3. There's so many, but the top 3. Okay, I think always bringing home something new. There's always something different going on, and that's really stimulating for the neurotypical or the partner, neurodiverse or neurotypical. There's always something new. The authenticity and passion that comes with neurodiversity. There's a real purity and passion about it, and thirdly, it's just really good fun. Just really good fun. Just brings fun into people's lives.
Yes, gosh, certainly does. Karen, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.